With thanks to the AP English section, Dr. Steinberg's AP English sections, we had a beautiful description of the importance of being earnest, which was, in fact, super confusing. And it's supposed to be, because the importance of earnest is an interesting, humorous, deadpan, funny sort of play. But it requires you to pay attention and really connect to the characters and try to follow along what's going on. When I was in 12th grade AP English, I remember that my AP English teacher, Mrs. Cardos, said to the class, no matter what the question is on the AP English exam, pick one book, know it really, really well, and no matter what the question is, figure out how to use that book to answer the question. And when I was a senior in high school, I indeed wrote about the importance of being earnest, which was such a favorite play of mine way back when I studied it first in 12th grade AP English. The fact that you have the opportunity to see it now is really a gift. I want to take the opportunity to thank a few people. We can't thank everybody, but to thank a few people who have invested so much into making this show what it is. I'm going to read a couple names so I don't forget anybody. But first of all, this beautiful set design is by Miss Rebecca Phillips. I want to thank Mr. Wander and Mr. Friedman. Rabbi Birnbaum, thank you for everything you do. We really appreciate it. None of this would happen without students that really invest their time and energy. So first of all, we'll applaud again for the whole casting crew afterwards, but let's specifically recognize the student director and student head of design, Devorah Goldstein. The head of tech and student head of design, Rachel Fishman. And ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for the director of our play, Miss Katzenellenbogen. Without further ado, I present to you Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake. I don't play accurately. Anybody can play accurately, but I play with a wonderful expression.
Yes, sir.
Do you have the cucumber sandwiches cut for Aunt Augusta?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with us, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had little experience of it myself up to the present. I've only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't think that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. Thank you, Lane, that will do.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage are somewhat lax. Really, if the lower order can't be counted upon to set us an example, what on earth is the use of them?
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
My dear Ernest, what brings you to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. What brings you? Where have you been since Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who is it that you amuse?
Oh, neighbors, neighbors.
Got good neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them.
What? Oh, yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? And why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, nobody, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well and good, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear boy, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way she flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come to town expressly to propose to her.
You said you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I see nothing at all romantic in proposing. One must be accepted. One usually is, I believe. After that, the excitement is all lost. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
My dear Algie, the divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there's no use speculating on the subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please, do not touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them all the time.
That is a very different matter. She is my aunt. You may have the bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is quite devoted to bread and butter.
Oh, and quite good bread and butter it is too.
My dear boy, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You look as if you are already married to Gwendolen. You are not already married to Gwendolen, nor do I think you ever will be.
What on earth do you mean?
My dear boy, in the first place, girls never marry the man they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear boy, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I can allow you to marry her, we must clear up the question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean by Cecily? Algie, what on earth do you mean by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name Cecily.
Bring me the cigarette case that Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined with us.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case this entire time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I'd been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you had. I am more than usually hard up. However, it makes no matter, for now that I read the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours at all.
Of course it's mine. You have seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside.
Oh, it is perfectly absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. Besides, this thing isn't yours. This was a present from someone of the name Cecily, and you have already said you know no one of that name.
Well, if you have to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes! My aunt. A charming lady she is, too. Lives in Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie!
Why, then, does she call herself Little Cecily? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear boy, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. Just give me back my cigarette case!
Why, then, does she call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. Why an aunt no matter size should call her nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to all of my friends as Ernest. You respond to the name Ernest. You look as if your name were Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes. But that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her uncle. Come, old boy, tell me the whole thing. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Fine. Now, produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear boy, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a young boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle out of motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives in my place in the country with her admiral governess, Miss Prism.
And where is this place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited.
I suspected as much. Go on. Now, why are you called Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know if you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is given the position of guardian, one has to adopt a strict moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother who goes by the name Earnest and lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, dear Algie, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I always suspected you to be a Bunburyist. You are, in fact, one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented for yourself a useful younger brother called Ernest, so that you may go up to town whenever you see fit. I have invented for myself an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, so that I may escape to the country whenever I please. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for his extraordinarily bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I have really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
Oh, I know, you are absurdly careless about sending out invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I have no intention of doing anything of the sort. To begin with, I dined with Aunt Augusta on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, she will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her husband across the table. That sort of thing is not very pleasant. In fact, it is not even decent. And the amount of women in London who flirt with their husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen out in public. And besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to show you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to kill my brother, and I suggest you do the same with with your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Nonsense. If I marry a charming girl
What
like
you do
Gwendolen...
not seem to understand is that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
Oh, don't try to be cynical. It is perfectly easy to be cynical.
My dear boy, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's so much beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can pull Aunt Augusta aside for 10 minutes so that you may have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about their meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I'm always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. We'll leave no room for developments. And I plan to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call upon Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Elaine! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially for Aunt Augusta.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed by this, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had crumpets with Lady Harbury. Thank you. I've quite the treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
Yes, I'm very sorry, Aunt Augusta, but I'm afraid I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I should hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment. But it seems I've just received a telegram. My poor friend Bunbury is dreadful. My poor friend Bunbury is dreadfully ill again. The doctor seems to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think that it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, though he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvements in his ailments goes. Well, I should be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse this Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception.
I will ask him, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. Now, I will go over the musical program I've drawn out for you if you will kindly follow me into the next room.
Thank you, Algernon. That is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it's been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever someone talks to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they really mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
I'd like to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of suddenly coming back into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, from the moment I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I've ever met. Well, since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, and my ideal has always been to love someone of the name Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment that Algernon mentioned to me that he had a friend named Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But if my name was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, now that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care for the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
But personally, darling, I think there are many much more charming names. Take Jack, for instance. Jack is a charming name.
Jack? No. There is very little music in the name Jack. It produces no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, the only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Yes, you know I love you, and you have led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not totally indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing at all has been said about marriage. Subject hasn't even been touched on.
May I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen!
Yes, darling, what have you got to say to me?
You know exactly what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. Oh, darling, I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mama, I must beg you to retire. Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finish what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Pardon me. You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mama!
The carriage, Gwendolen! Gwendolen, the carriage! You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you were not down on my list of eligible young men. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion, Mr. Worthing, that a man who desires to get married should know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
In investments, chiefly. I have a country house with a few acres to it, but I don't depend on it for my real income.
You have a country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope?
I have a house in Belgrove Square.
What number in Belgrove Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. Now, on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I'm afraid I have lost both of my parents.
Both? To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. But to lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth.
I'm afraid I don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I was found.
Found?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, found. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an elderly gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with the first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, a handbag. A somewhat large black handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life.
May I ask you what you suggest I do, Lady Bracknell? I need hardly say I would do anything to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible and to make a definite effort to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What is it to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I, Lord Bracknell, would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel? Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. Oh, don't play that ghastly tune, Algie! And who do you think you are? Ah!
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolen refused you? Oh, she's always refusing people. I find it is most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolen is right as a trivet. Her mother, on the other hand, is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't quite know what a gorgon is, but I'm certain Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster. I beg your pardon, Algie. I suppose I shouldn't talk of your relations in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is precisely what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there is any chance in about 150 years of Gwendolen becoming like her mother, do you, Algie?
My dear boy, all women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everyone is clever nowadays. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I would surely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolen about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear boy, the truth is not something one tells to a simple, sweet, refined girl.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Before the week is out, I shall have killed him. I'll say he died abroad in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy, and rather suddenly too, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear boy. It's the kind of thing that runs in the family. You had much better say he died of a severe chill.
You are certain a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of the kind?
Of course not.
Very well, then. My poor brother Ernest, carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him all right.
Yes, but didn't you say that Cecily was a little too much interested in Ernest? Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, that'll be all right. Cecily isn't a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She goes for long walks, pays no attention at all to her studies, and has a capital appetite.
I would very much like to meet Cecily.
I will take great care to ensure that you never do. She's excessively pretty, and she is only just 18.
Does Gwendolen know you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
Oh, that'll be all right. Gwendolen and Cecily are destined to be great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they will be calling each other sister.
My dear boy, girls only call each other that once they've called each other a lot of things first. Now, if we are to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. And what are we to do tonight after dinner? Perhaps we shall go to the theatre?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
Well, then maybe we shall go to the club.
Oh no, I hate talking.
Well, we might trot round to the Empire at 10 then.
Oh no, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
Well, then what shall we do?
Nothing.
Oh, it is awfully hard work doing nothing.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolen, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Gwendolen, I really don't think I can allow that sort of thing at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that. Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, there is nothing she can possibly do to alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic origins, as related to me by Mamma, with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
I will communicate with you daily.
My own darling.
Algie, you may turn round now.
Yes, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
May I escort you to your carriage, dear Gwendolen?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, Sir.
Fine. Bills. Drafting letter. A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I am going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
You can pack my hunting shoes, my smoking jackets, and all of my Bunbury suits into the bag. I will I hope tomorrow will be a good day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Oh, Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Now that is a sensible young girl. The only girl I've ever loved in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm merely concerned for Bunbury is all.
Well, if you don't take care, your poor friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Oh, I love scrapes. They are the only thing that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily! Cecily! Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it to page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I'll look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way.
Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality will be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety over that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come up here sometime. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. Cecily, you must put away a diary. I don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter all of the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is a diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually records the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened in the first place. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all of the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of a 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in the earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Oh, Dr. Chasuble!
How are we
This is a pleasure.
How are we this morning? You are, I trust, well, Miss Prism?
Oh, Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I've not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. In fact, I was thinking of that and not my German lesson when the rector came in.
Cecily, I hope you're not being inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be one of Miss Prism's pupils, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet, has he?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Yes, well, I must not disturb Eugenia and a pupil any longer.
Eugenia? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical illusion merely drawn from the pagan authors.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find that I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you must read political economy in my absence.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station, and he has brought his luggage with him.
Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden.
He
He said he was quite anxious to speak with you, privately, for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everybody else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe that I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I am not wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
Well, if you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
I suppose I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been quite bad in my own small way.
I'm not sure you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to take the first train up on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement, but still, I think you'd better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy our outfit.
I wouldn't trust Jack to buy my outfit. He has no taste at all in neckties. Besides, I cannot go. I want you to reform me, cousin Cecily. You might make that your mission?
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
Thank you. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
Oh, that is because I'm hungry is all.
How thoughtless of me. Do come in.
Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I've had a buttonhole first.
A mark called Neil?
I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Well, then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
I don't think that I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are much too alone, Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
You are too kind. I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was strictly against matrimony.
Well, that is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. You do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself to permanent public temptation. Meant to be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
I've been told sometimes not even to her.
Well, that depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Mr. Worthing, I hope that this garment of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead!
Your brother Ernest dead.
Quite dead.
what a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but this is indeed a sad, sad blow.
Yes, this is very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I received a telegram last night.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
Yes, a severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Mr. Worthing, you would no doubt wish me make some slight allusion to the tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon about the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. I've preached it at harvest festivals, christenings, confirmation days, days of humiliation and festal days.
That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble. You mentioned christening, I think. I suppose you know how to christen all right.
It
I mean, of
is,
course.
I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in his parish.
The fact is, I myself would like to be christened this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened before.
I don't recall anything about it.
Well, have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have.
You need have no apprehensions. At what hour would you wish the ceremony be performed?
Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. Now, Mr. Worthing, I will no longer intrude into a house of sorrow. I would only beg you to not be so bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack, oh, I'm pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes have you got on? Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child!
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do you look happy? You look as if you had a toothache. Now I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
That is nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he might have treated you in the past, he is still your brother. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
Well, these are very joyful tidings indeed.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My own brother in the dining room? I don't know what to make of it all. It seems to me to be perfectly absurd.
Brother John!
Good heavens!
I have come up from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all of the trouble that I have given you and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I find his coming down here utterly disgraceful. He knows very well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he has been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury! Oh, well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else.
Of course, I admit that the faults are all on my side, but I must say that Brother John's coldness towards me is particularly painful.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me.
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's beautiful, is it not, to see such perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You've done a beautiful action today, my child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
God bless.
You young scoundrel, Algie! You must get out of here at once. I don't allow any bunburying here. It was just a prank.
We have put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. We suppose that's all right?
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. We have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus,
A dressing case.
2 hat boxes,
And a rather large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I cannot stay longer than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been urgently called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. They look perfectly ridiculous. I say it is very childish to be in this deep state of mourning for someone who is really staying in your house for a whole week as a guest.
You are not staying in my house for a week as a guest or anything else. You have got to go by the 4:05 train.
I would not leave you in this deep state of mourning. It would be most unfriendly.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you do it quickly. I never saw anyone take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, at any rate, it is better than being as overdressed as you always are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. Your bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I love Cecily, and that is everything. Now, I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He has sent the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a most painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes?
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly that you are without a doubt the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
You keep a diary? Oh, Cecily, do let me read it.
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wondrous and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
Oh, I don't think that you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog water's at the door, sir.
Tell her to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew he was staying on till next week at the same hour.
I don't care what Jack thinks. I don't care what anybody in the world thinks except for you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under that dear old tree there. The next day I bought this little ring in your name, and this is the little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I get you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. And this is the little basket in which I keep all of your dear letters.
But, my dear, sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your own letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, may I read them, Cecily?
Oh, no, they would make you far too conceited. Oh, the 3 you wrote to me after I'd broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a bit.
Oh, but was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was, on the 24th of last March. You can read the entry if you'd like.
Oh my.
Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel that it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But what had I done? My dear Cecily, I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I'm very hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it hardly would have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are.
You dear romantic boy.
You won't ever break off the engagement again, won't you?
I don't think I could now that we've actually met. Besides, there is the question of your name.
Oh, yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love somebody whose name was Ernest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
Yes, Cecily, but if I had any other name, does that mean you could not marry me?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
My dear, sweet, loving, little darling, it isn't at all a bad name. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. Cecily, if my name were Algernon, couldn't you love me?
Well, I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. but I fear that I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here, I suppose, is quite experienced in all the practices of the rites and rituals of the church?
Oh, yes, Dr. Tazable is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, most important business.
Oh!
I shan't be longer than half an hour.
I think that it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has called to see Mr. Worthing. On some very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Is it Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack in some philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think that it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other for such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then it is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity of my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be this proper sphere for the man. Cecily, Mama, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has raised me to be extremely short-sighted. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed?
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, by Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange that he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. Cecily, I'm quite fond of you. I've liked you ever since I first met you. But I feel bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I cannot help but express a wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age.
Oh.
Earnest is the very soul of truth and honor. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are susceptible to the physical charms of others.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm afraid they've not been on good terms for a very long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think about it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship quite like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I'm afraid there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 5 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he proposed to me yesterday at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray, do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so sorry, my darling Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid that I have the prior claim.
Dearest Gwendolen, it would distress me more than I could tell you if it were to cause you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been roped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you! This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I've never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall we lay the tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town?
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody at all does. The country always bores me to death.
May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best households nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake! I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
to save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I met you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar nature to make in the neighborhood.
Oh! Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolen, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To little Cecily? Of course not. What could put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman who is at present standing beside you is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolen!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen. I mean, to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is at present standing beside you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Are you really called John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced upon both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolen.
You will always call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I'd like to be permitted to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there's just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Earnest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance for us to know where he is at the present moment.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm very inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you ever a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I think it is quite clear that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is certainly not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us in there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, is it?
Yes, and the most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had.
Well, the only small satisfaction I take in the whole matter is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to go down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear Algy. And a very good thing, too.
Your little brother is a little off color. You won't be able to make your trips to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was.
And as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, your taking in a simple, sweet, innocent young girl is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I see no possible defense for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all. I love her.
I wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
can sit there calmly eating muffins while we are in this horrible trouble I can't quite make out? You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't quite eat muffins in an agitated state. The butter could get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat muffins.
I think it is perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
That is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
But I thought you said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless for you to eat muffins. That is a very different thing.
That may be so, but the muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go before having some dinner first. That's absurd.
That is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. I've already told you I am particularly fond of muffins, and there are only 2 left.
Algernon! I have asked you to go! I don't want you here! Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. Besides, there's still 1 muffin left.
Ah!
The fact that they did not follow us into the house at once, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't a cough. Oh.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing! What explanation? I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
So that I may have the opportunity to meet you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it so that you might be able to come up to town more often to see me?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the greatest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. Their explanations certainly seem to be satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said.
So you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True. There are principles at stake that one simply cannot surrender. Which of us should be the one to tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. You will take the time from me, then?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, are you prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, are you ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
Darling.
Darling.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately.
Yes, Mama.
Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I'm glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I've never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards to Algernon. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta. Hold on 1 second. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Hi, Algernon. Nice to meet you.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury is somewhere else at the present. Oh, hello. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Oh, Bunbury, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage?
Oh, no, the doctors told Bunbury that he could not live, and so he died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. However, I'm glad to say that he made up his mind at the last and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we've finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, may I ask, who is that young person?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there's anything peculiarly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me considerably above the proper average. I think some preliminary inquiries on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London?
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifthshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. I also have in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Gwendolen's birth, Cecily's birth, baptism, registration, confirmation, and the measles, both the English and German variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see. I'm not myself in favor of premature experiences. Come, Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We've not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I'd better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, only about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000? And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, dear. pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter that. Kindly turn around, sweet child. No. The side view is what I want. Chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They're worn very high, just at the present. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
there are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care twopence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. Indeed, when I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
Well, I think the marriage had better take place quite soon. I'm not in favor of long engagements, to speak frankly. They always give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot be married without my consent. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing but looks, everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very deeply to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is, I don't trust his moral character at all. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon?
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence, he obtained admission to my house under the false pretense of being my brother, and drank an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouer Brut 89. Continuing his disgraceful deceit, he subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he has known all along that I never had a brother, I don't have a brother, and I don't have any intention of ever having one in the future, not even of any kind.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I've decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come over here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you yet again, Lady Bracknell, but in accordance with her late grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come of age till she is 35.
What? That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that long. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what are we to do?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us have to look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, we have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings this afternoon.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Madame, these 2 gentlemen have shown a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized.
Am I to understand there appear to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I'm afraid that as things stand now, it would be of very little value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
Well, I'm very grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. I must go back to the church immediately. I've just been informed by the pew opener that Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry for over an hour and a half.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention Miss Prism?
Yes, I'm on my way to meet her now.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism, a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and she is the very picture of respectability.
She is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madame.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has for the past 3 years been Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
Despite what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism? Come here, Prism! Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house in charge of a perambulator containing a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. In it contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day that you mention, a day that is forever branded in my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I also had with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I intended to put my manuscript of work of fiction that I've worked during my few unaccompanied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
And where did you deposit the handbag, Miss Prism?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism! This is a matter of no small importance to me. Where did you deposit that handbag that contained that infant?
I left it in one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station? What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. You will wait here for me, Gwendolen.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you for all of my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if he was having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped.
I do wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Miss Prism, is this the handbag? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends upon your answer.
Yes, indeed, it's mine. Over here on the lock are my initials. I had forgotten what an extravagant mood I had placed in there. This bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm so delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It's been a great inconvenience all these years being without it.
Miss Prism, more has been restored to you than just the handbag. I was the infant you placed in it.
You?
Yes! Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I'm unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is a lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, would you... I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
The news I have will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother! I always knew I had a brother! Didn't I always say I had a brother? Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel! You had much better start treating me with more respect. You have never acted to me much like a brother in all your life.
Oh, well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
My own! But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
Good heavens! I had entirely forgotten about the matter. Your decision with regard to my Christian name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Well, then the matter must be sorted out at once. Aunt Augusta, what Christian name was I given? Let me hear the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt that he had one.
Algy, can you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were not on speaking terms. He died before I was 1 year old.
Aunt Augusta, his name would appear in the army records of the period, I suppose.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the past 40 years are in this room. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Generals. Malum, Maxbaum, Marshall, Messer, what ghastly names they have. Magsby, Mobbs, Moncrief. Lieutenant, 1840. Captain, Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel. General, 1869. Christian names, Ernest John. I always told you, Gwendolen, that my name was Ernest. Well, it really is Ernest. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now that the general was called Ernest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt from the first you could have no other name.
Gwendolen, it is very painful for a man to find out that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia!
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolen! At last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, for the first time in my life, I finally understand the vital importance of being earnest.
Dr. Shinar. A few thank yous. Of course, thank you to Mr. Freeman, Mr. Wander, and Nick. They're awesome. Nick and Rob, of course. Ms. Phillips for this awesome design set. It's really awesome. Thank you so much. And a huge thank you to Miss Kay. Over the past 4 years, she's watched us grow. It's insane, but more than that. Okay. Yeah, do you want to have anything else to say?
Yeah, we wanted to just say thank you so much for coming and watching the show.
Yay, have a good night.
Thanks, guys.